Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Austin Ivy Plus Virtual Speaker Series hosted here in Zoom and streaming live on YouTube from Austin, Texas. My name is Stephanie Pace. I'm a realtor here in Austin and the president of the Cal Alumni Club of Austin, an affiliate chapter of the Cal Alumni Association at UC Berkeley, and an active social and professional networking organization of more than 300 Cal alumni living here in Austin, Texas.
And my name is Jennifer. I'm a pharmacist and a VP of the Cal Alumni Club of Austin. This event tonight not only represents UC Berkeley, but also represents the Austin Ivy Plus, which is a collection of over 1,000 Austin-based alumni from all the Ivy League schools, the Seven Sisters, and several prestigious private and public universities. Tonight, we're highlighting the incredible work of Austin-based superstar Dave Kramer.
Dave serves as Program Director for Planet Texas 2050, an exciting grand challenge interdisciplinary research initiative, which brings together faculty and researchers from across UT. He'll discuss Planet Texas's aims to tackle the interrelated challenges of climate change and population growth, while also breaking down traditional academic silos and conducting research and inquiry that is as relevant and useful as possible to communities in Texas and beyond. As Program Director, Dave's role is akin to a chief of staff, and he will discuss the challenges and opportunities he sees in tackling climate change from this vantage point after having spent 15 years working for smaller nonprofits engaged in climate and sustainability work.
Dave is a graduate of Dartmouth and of Harvard Kennedy School. He began his career teaching abroad in Colombia before shifting to nonprofit work focused on sustainable international development and climate change. After many years working on international issues, he now directs Planet Texas 2050, an interdisciplinary grand research challenge at UT.
We have one request for our audience. Please mute your audio when our speaker is talking and remain muted until audience Q&A. If audio does become an issue, we will be forced to remove you from tonight's event.
Now we're ready to hear from Dave. Take it away.
Great, thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm going to just go straight into the slides. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I might be moving at a fast clip, hopefully get through it all, and there's hopefully time for Q&A. But thank you so much for joining. I know it's a really busy time of year, a strange year, of course, but thanks. I really appreciate everyone's attendance. Now, you'd think I would know how to handle Zoom after all the Zoom time. Here we go. All right. So I'm just going to dive right in here. The first slide might strike you as a little strange, but when you think of climate migration or climate refugees, what comes to mind? If you're like me, I'm assuming like you, if you're like me, you might immediately jump to think about folks from developing regions. In my case, definitely folks from Central America who have begun to try to escape some of the worst challenges that they face. This year, we all saw and witnessed kind of in slow motion the hurricanes that formed over and over, making this year the one of the most active hurricane seasons on record. If I checked CNN obsessively, and it was kind of blowing up on me. But these are a couple of examples of where those hurricanes affected in Honduras and Central America, as well as for the first time ever in the Colombian islands off the coast of Nicaragua. But I think if we think about it, consider the fact that climate change also and climate migration is something that we have to deal with and think about in this country. A tweet that our my communications colleagues at UT sent out recently on behalf of Planet Texas talked about this, the fact that climate data shows that climate damage will wreak havoc on the southern third of the country, the United States, erasing more than 80% of the economic output in this region and likely turning migration northward from a choice to an imperative. However, and we have events like Hurricane Harvey, which happened about a year after I moved here to Austin, and obviously affected folks further south in places like Galveston, Rockport, and Houston. We also see drought. There's the 100th meridian is something that, if at least on our website, on Planet Texas's website, you can see this little slider. So I just took a couple of screenshots from what is predicted to happen. Greater drought. We're experiencing quite a bit of drought right now, or quite a little rainfall right now, and if that continues, there's a very good chance that there will be a drying out. So there's this weird phenomena of great moisture coming in and flash events, things like hurricanes and other concentrated rainfall events, but dried out soils and less useful land due to the heat and drought. And then this kind of growth data, I just took a screenshot from this local paper, the community impact paper, which comes to me free, on occasion, monthly. And the fact that Austin is growing, folks like me who move here, moved from Boston myself, but we see this massive growth. And this is just Austin. It's happening all over Texas. And then you may not even be aware of this, but the fact that there are neglected tropical diseases in what Peter Hotez has called the new Texas. I learned about this from one of the Planet Texas researchers and the work that I'll mention a little bit later, but we see West Nile virus, Chagas disease, dengue, chikungunya, and other diseases that typically were relegated to the tropics are now moving northward as the climate changes. And there are lots of other factors causing greater susceptibility to these diseases in Texas, which is exhibits even greater and greater inequality, places of poverty, places and communities that are less able to deal with it are more affected. And of course, 2020 is just from Rolling Stone, but the fact that this year we saw all kinds of crises converging, knowing that people have been talking about climate change as a threat multiplier for years, but boom, we saw it the fires out west, the other challenges that we are dealing with as a country, COVID-19, racial strife and challenges, et cetera. So you might sit back and go, man, I don't know about any of you, but I love The Far Side. I might be dating myself a little, but the Gary Larson, made this cartoon years ago, but a dinosaur talking about how the extinction of his species was imminent, and everything's changing, and we don't have a brain to deal with it. And then there's also another Far Side cartoon that I love, partially because I speak Spanish and enjoy it, but I think a lot of folks would get this whether or not they speak Spanish well. But the scientist saying to the other scientists, we have all this data, we have no idea what it's saying, and we can't interpret it because they simply don't have anyone on their team that understands Spanish, and they think the dolphins are speaking something strange habla español sounds, right? But basically they don't have the ability to capture the data and to make sense of it. So that is a preface. This talk today originally was titled Helping UT Tackle Climate Change. And the little intro here, the little slide or the photo on the bottom left is me and my family actually in Dallas at a Colombian bakery. We were new to Texas, trying to find out where good Colombian food could be found. My wife is from Colombia, and I lived there for years. And the bluebonnets of Texas, it's beautiful here. But what I'd like to retitle this talk is Helping UT Austin Help Texas. It's less elegant, but build climate resilience. And the reason being, when you think about helping UT tackle climate change, I think the title that I created for this talk is a little bit of I don't want to give you the impression that Planet Texas 2050 is the one program that helps UT tackle climate change. There is, in fact, a really great sustainability office, the Office of Sustainability at UT, that does fantastic work on that and is working on sustainability master plan and working with all different a variety of actors at UT on sustainability, on climate planning, on emissions reductions and things like that. Planet Texas 2050 is more about helping build climate resilience by bringing together researchers from across the 40 acres or the campus. And it's a grand challenge. Before I jump into that, I just want to reiterate my own path, because I wanted to make this a little bit of a sort of reflective reflection for myself and for you about my own path and how a winding path might actually be okay. Sometimes I've sort of beat myself up over that over the years, thinking, what do I do? And my daughter, who's now 15, still has no idea how to explain what I do to her teachers or friends or friends' parents. But my own path has been kind of a winding road, and started out as a teacher, worked for an organization taught for a time in Colombia and then Boston. Worked for this organization called Ecologic Development Fund, which focuses mainly on this region, Mesoamerica, Mexico and Central America. And then worked for a little over a year for an organization, collaboration called Landscale, which is a collaboration between Vera, which works on climate standards for a variety of different types of things, and Rainforest Alliance. Along the way, I think this shows kind of tonight might show the power of networks and networking. Well, this network, which I helped create with a friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine, is called the Austin Network of International Impact Professionals. And to be honest, it's a little bit dormant at the moment, but it's still something that was really fun to get started here in Austin. It led me to Planet Texas, and the way that it did is because one of my friends who helped start, named Karina Brasser, is also a Berkeley alum, I believe. She introduced me to a woman named Jenny Nelson, who then became the program director for Planet Texas 2050. Her family moved up north and called me up, said this job was open. I was moving on from Landscale at the time, and was able to secure the job with Planet Texas over time. And luckily got the job when I did, started it in April. So I've never actually been on the UT campus for this job. But bridging barriers, so just to give you a little, hopefully I'm not throwing too much jargon at you, but bridging barriers is the name for grand challenges at the University of Texas. They exist because there are complex problems, and scholarly research questions can only be addressed if you bring together really a wide variety of different academic disciplines and folks who are dedicated to that really tough work, working at the intersection between different disciplines. And so the president of UT at the time, Greg Fenves, who's now at Emory University in Georgia, basically set forth this vision, this moonshot goal, said, let's solicit ideas, and then the team in the research team, the vice president of research in that department, sorted them and synthesized and came up with the very first grand challenge, which is Planet Texas 2050, based on the interest and the kind of way that things coalesced in terms of common themes. So a grand challenge, again, is kind of based on a wicked problem that requires new kinds of collaboration. There are lots of grand challenges that big funders like the Gates Foundation or that the government might run. A university grand challenge is focused on multidisciplinary research. But they come in many shapes and sizes. And looks like this slide's a little fuzzy, but just some examples of other universities. Cornell University has one called Migrations. UCLA has a really great grand challenge that's focused on, I think they have a variety of them, but one of them is Sustainable Los Angeles. So there's a lot of potential exchange with Planet Texas. The University of New Mexico has one focused on sustainable water resources, and then Cambridge University in the UK has one focused on global challenges and the Sustainable Development Goals, which some of you may be familiar with, the sort of iconic look of that. But for Planet Texas 2050, if you do the now, I guess, kind of old-fashioned word cloud, these are some of the main themes that come up in our work. And some of these themes and words are contested, and we're actively working to figure them out, like the word resilience, which is part of our mission and part of my talk, right? But it's a term that also has been challenging when you think about different types of communities, not just the natural world, but actually human communities, and how that, what that word and term might mean. Sort of pick yourself up, keep going, come on, can potentially have some negative or even condescending overtones. So the vision of Planet Texas 2050 is based on these questions of what happens when we can't handle it anymore, when things break down, you know, in the sort of scary negative future scenario. But in the positive sense, you know, how can we find a way to help communities trust and understand models? All of this is more relevant than ever right now with COVID-19, I believe. How do communities prepare for the next big storm and lay claim to the resources they need from all different ways, community power, or whether it's political, or whether it's through representatives and organizations. So making Texas resilient is our grand challenge. And we look at the numbers of potential population doubling, and the fact that we know that climate change is going to bring severe weather and droughts and floods. And so again, the history, I don't think I need to rehash it here, except to say that, you know, once the grand challenges got launched, then a variety of projects were funded and kind of tested out, and under Jenny Nelson's leadership, you know, really grew with, and then now, as I've taken over, we're pivoting to 6 flagship projects that I'll explain in a bit. But that just means we're kind of concentrating on 6 really kind of complex, multifaceted projects that tackle some of the most important problems based on what we've learned, and opportunities as well. In the first phase, which I would describe as that through September 2019 and through mid 2020, we had some really interesting and transdisciplinary work. One of the neatest features for me of this work is that there's a real commitment to the arts and humanities. It's not just STEM and science and technology disciplines, but there's a real dedication to narrative and story and how that can help us reframe. If any of you have you know, thought about politics, or I'm quite sure most of you have recently, reframing things and using language and telling stories differently is critical. And just wanted to give you a few examples of the types of work that we've been able to do. I think the example on the bottom right is an escape room. So it's been designed as a experiential way to learn about climate change and the future. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to use an escape room live, but we've been able to use VR technology. I say we when I say the researchers and the teams of graduate students and researchers. We've also had researchers looking at the history of water in Austin and the history of water on the southern border, and the fact that it's, you know, there are political borders and then there are natural borders, and sometimes they're not the same thing. And then you look here at Bull Creek, where I went recently with friends. A lot of the water in Bull Creek, based on research done by some of the folks in Planet Texas 2050, is actually traceable to leakage from homes and pipe systems in Austin. It's not all just rainfall and natural. So there's a lot of system-wide challenges with our water resources. Not that I expect anyone to read the fine print here, but it's on our website as well. But I just wanted to mention we have currently 8 faculty leaders, and we call them the theme organizing community. Jay Banner, Dev Nyogi, Tim Kitt, Fernanda Leche, Catherine Lieberneck, Suzanne Pierce, Adam Rabinowitz, and Miriam Solis, all from a variety of schools and disciplines. And then myself, plus a colleague, Jonathan Lowell, who's a geography PhD from UT, and he's our community liaison. Jonathan and I try to keep the train running, and Fernanda right now is our chair. So this, I think I will skip by, but I'll pop that in the chat later. It's a pretty neat little network map of early Planet Texas 2050. It's from our earlier projects. But just to note, in solidarity with most of you, Zoom has been our life, and we recently had Zoom has been my entire way of interacting with all of these folks since I started in April. But this was a recent retreat we did when we were thinking about, so how do we plan for the future, and what is societal impact, and what is community engaged research, and how does it work when we think about our flagship projects? And that's where I can say, working with these folks brings me to a sense of imposter syndrome sometimes. So, I think that I don't have a PhD. I have, I think, some interesting experience, but I can say it's been, just reflecting on the challenges of working with brilliant people who are really deep in their fields. Sometimes I have to remind myself that I have other talents and abilities to bring to the table, which include things like helping refine the mission and refine the way that we discuss the potential for impact and measurement of it. And I think one of the things I've really been hammering is this: how do we really co-design resilience strategies with stakeholder communities, drawing from my experience with Central American communities and realizing that it's different contexts, but there's some things I can learn and bring to the table. And also how we frame our work at this intersection of scholarly innovation and societal impact, thinking about really pushing on, okay, what is impact? It's not just something we write in a proposal to the National Science Foundation, but what is it that we are really trying to achieve, and how do we hold ourselves to that? I think there are certain skills that I bring, and other folks who are not in academia or have not been in academia for their entire careers can bring to the table that help researchers and teams work better together. So quickly, our 6 flagship projects, which you can read about if you look on our website and look on the blog, the Medium blog, are these. I'll quickly run through them just because I think they show a nice breadth and depth of work. The Sustainable Texas Communities project, which is working with a local and statewide nonprofit, looking at how to help folks find green career pathways out of poverty in communities, and kind of empower students to take that on. Biodiversity and Changing Landscapes project, which is focused on across Texas, looking at how to monitor different types of things like wildlife, weather, and soil, and pathogens, as well as how to monitor that using bioacoustic monitoring and learning how to do remote sensing in new ways. And then the 2 here, the Resilient Cities in a Post-Carbon Future and Networks for Hazard Preparedness and Response, are really looking at different ways of helping ensure sustainability of urban regions and areas. And Texas is urbanizing rapidly. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, around 90% of Texas's population is now urban, but there's a lot of clearly still a lot of heritage in the entire rural area and peri-urban areas. And then we have 2 others. The Integrated Models for Complex Decision-Making takes advantage of, which many of you may know, the fact that UT has one of the fastest supercomputers in the world. And there's a group called the Texas Advanced Computing Center. And they collaborate with us to help us bring together all kinds of different data. And then last, the Stories of Ancient Resilience is a project focused on the past, but learning about how to re-examine the past and think beyond just the typical narratives of collapse and apocalyptic endings, and think more about what did societies in the past perhaps do right or learn, and using some pretty cool methods that actually the Texas Advanced Computing Center is helping them with. We recently also commissioned art from a student who is named Champ Turner, recently graduated from I forget which high school, but a high school in Texas, and is now about to start at Brown University. He took the fall semester off, but I guess he could join this group too. But he worked with each of the flagship teams as they were thinking about their ideas and helped them create kind of these sort of stylized explanations of their projects. So for example, the past project here, I don't know how clear it comes across to you, but there's like a variety of an aqueduct system and other things that the Stories of Ancient Resilience team might look at, or this down here is supposed to be like a biosphere and bioacoustic monitoring mechanisms. So it was a fun project to work with, and it was fun to be able to bring that sort of, I guess, right brain thinking to the table. And then when we think about flagships, we're proud that the fact that we've been able to build partnerships with policymakers and community groups. And as I mentioned already, we're launching multi-year flagship projects, but hoping to help and collaborate with organizations like these: GABA, Go Austin, Vamos Austin, which works mainly in, I believe, the Dove Springs part of Austin, EcoRise, and the Community Powered Workshop. And so the last couple of slides here, these, I'm just putting a plug in here. I mean, it's past the panel picker stage, but I hope both of these, or at least one of these projects gets into the South by Southwest lineup in March. But the escape room that I mentioned and showed the kind of red lighting photo of, as well as another project that is looking at how to look at VR experiences, they're kind of similar, but they're two separate panels that we'll be hosting. And then putting a plug in here, after I close out of my presentation, I'll drop the links into the chat, but we have a couple of events coming up if you're interested. December 16th, next week at 5:30, there's a project that had to adapt a lot with COVID. Originally, it was planned to be a drama-based kind of experiential learning around climate change, using Zilker Park, et cetera, in the summer. That didn't happen, so they pivoted and are using Zoom, and we're able to work with the Austin Youth River Watch and high school students and after-school programs in Austin. So they'll be presenting on that date at that time. And then on December 18th, I'm really excited about this. Can climate be stranger than fiction? With a lecturer named John Pipkin, who and his students teaches a CliFi class. I'd never even heard of the term CliFi, but this is the kind of cool stuff I get exposed to daily, and was able to create a platform through Planet Texas 2050 and our support staff to make a really nice final presentation space for the students who had to go home after Thanksgiving. So that feels good to me. So I guess one of the ways that I like to stay hopeful, even though some nights I wake up, in a cold sweat, wondering what am I doing or what is going on with this? How am I raising my kids in this stuff? A professor named Suzanne Moser, through an organization called Post Carbon Institute and a blog that they have, I believe, or a podcast that they have called What Can Possibly Go Right, said this, and I really liked it. Hope requires uncertainty, and only if the future is not written can we possibly wish for hope. So inviting you to stay in touch, but that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Dave. So now we're going to open up our discussion to live questions from our audience. You can speak up or just type your questions in the chat box. So here we go. We actually did have a couple questions that were submitted to us in advance. One is a very interesting and exciting question. Since Texas is so dependent on oil and gas, how does UT justify sponsoring work to deal with climate crisis issues, yet take large sums from big oil?
That's a tough question. I think that it's interesting. I think UT, and I actually think the oil and gas industry sees kind of the writing on the wall. But UT does have a lot of involvement. There are geologists and hydrologists involved in trying to find more efficient ways to extract fossil fuels. Last week, there was a symposium called the Mitchell Family Symposium put on by the Office of Sustainability. And I think Dean Mora, I forget her first name, but a woman named, it might be Claudia, but I don't want to misstate that, from the Jackson School of Geosciences, made the statement that she thought, any transition takes time. So you've got to be working on all fronts. So I guess my answer is I don't think it's illegitimate to be working on kind of the most kind of progressive, even anti-oil and gas type research or work, while also taking money in a way. It's the system we're working in, and I think we can use the money to make the transition quicker. But it is a little bit of a moral challenge for some of us sometimes who see would like that transition to happen as fast as possible. But it's a good question. I would love any kind of further debate or challenges or just ideas from any of you.
Okay, we had another previously submitted question. How do you get folks to collaborate across disciplines when incentives don't exist within academia for it?
That's a great question. So I woke up early this morning, actually, and tuned into this webinar put on by a group called Shape ID. I forget what the acronym stands for. Living in acronym soup sometimes, but it's a European network looking at transdisciplinary research, and their question that was put forth for the webinar and participants or the speakers was basically that, like, how do you do this integrative work? And I actually, even though I'd rather be like running or hanging out, making breakfast or something early in the morning, it was one of the best webinars I have attended. And I think what struck me was their insistence that the work of an integrative expert, so to speak, is vital, and it shouldn't be relegated to just coordinator, or even as I stated in the original kind of language for this, even maybe chief of staff. Not sure that that's even accurate completely for what I do, but I think that this actually, this idea that the integrative work that has to be done between researchers, but also up and down the chain, if you will, and the negotiation with the folks running the university is a uniquely interesting position that I'm in. I wouldn't say I have a great deal of power to change the way universities work and the tenure system operates, and the kind of quote unquote publish or perish mentality is still a thing all over. But I think that being able to find ways to break into the system, to find ways to tout the societal impact, I think, of the work, and then use that as a win for the university or the department. That's where I see the opportunity to start to crack the armor a little bit. And for me, I guess I come from that NGO and nonprofit background where the community benefits and the societal impact is something I am deeply committed to. Yet I realize that there's a place for research that isn't necessarily applied yet. So there's kind of a range of it. So I don't know, that was a rambling answer, but I think it's challenging, but I think it has a lot to do with just being really fully aware of what you're negotiating between.
I've got a question, if I can just say it. How are the results being disseminated? Are you traditional, academic papers or conferences or things, or are you meeting with people from the city and things like that to try to jumpstart some of these things? Or
a little bit of both. It's a good question. It has obviously been harder in these months. I mean, feel like in some ways I've never landed yet because personally, just because I've always been Zooming in this job. But we had, just as an example, last week, I think it might have been just earlier this week, we had a research showcase, which was a way to disseminate the work and tell people about how it went or where things stood. But the woman from the City of Austin Water Department attended and was really excited about potentially collaborating with us. So seizing upon those opportunities and maybe looking for them to begin with. So we have some of our researchers are actually involved in helping develop the City of Austin climate equity plan, or doing heat mapping with community organizations. There's also, I think that Texas A&M, for example, has it's a different kind of university. By it's founded as a land grant university, and it's got kind of its tentacles in all the counties in Texas because it has to, the extension work. But being able to kind of collaborate with them, there are some new opportunities that we're looking at right now when it comes to things like collaborating with them and the state legislature. And but I think to do that more systematically and intentionally would be smart.
So Silky Wong is asking a question. Is your team at UT working on any climate change research models related to the use of personal electrical vehicles? And if yes, can you explain more on the research details? If not, what are your thoughts on this type of research? And she always wonders if the use of EV will actually provide sustainable climate protection results, or if it is indeed does not make much impact in the long run.
Good question. I guess this is where my Pinocchio guy comes out in some ways. I mean, I think I'm not deeply knowledgeable about every possible solution, but first of all, I would say we don't have any deep work being done on that. We have had some researchers look at the potential for electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles in evacuating in orderly ways from hurricane areas under hurricane warnings. But there's I cannot remember the name of the organization, but here in Austin that does a lot of the personal sort of electrical vehicle work. That is the woman's name is Susan Engelking, who I actually met through my Rotary Club here in Austin, but she's definitely an advocate for that. And also for safety and livability, I think there's also that. But I wonder if Project Drawdown might have, if you've heard of that before, might have some good research on your final part of the question, if it makes much impact at all. I guess I would hope that everything makes impact, but there are trade-offs, right, when it comes to policies. The one last bit I would add is I think there might be opportunities for our sustainable cities in a post-carbon, sustainable and equitable cities in a post-carbon future project, the Flagship Project, to look at that in some, even if it's small way. Thank you, Silky, for the question. Of course.
There was another question. How do you stay hopeful with this work? It can seem overwhelming and depressing. Yeah,
so I have here, this is sitting on my desk for good old visual aid. This came in the mail not long, climate crisis, can we dial it down? There's all this stuff that's like hitting us over the head constantly. I guess, I'm by nature a fairly optimistic, positive guy. But I do believe, I guess at the end of the day, I believe that there's a way to come together and figure out new models for whether it's research or it's action with, or both. I guess I don't let myself get too down because I try to stay busy thinking about how are we going to measure the impact, or what proof do we have of what we've done, whether it's working or not. So I don't know. That's a tough one. I guess I can see how, there's a lot of research done on climate guilt or other things, types of challenges people feel emotionally because of this. It's traumatic for the globe, but I don't really feel like those dinosaurs, I guess.
Jen and I did have a question. How do lay people get involved? How do people on this call get involved helping out this mission? What are you looking for in people who do want to get involved? Just basics like that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose, one thing that is super helpful for me and my colleagues is are new ideas and questions like the one that Silky asked, but being involved in attending events. I guess it's not the same as a nonprofit that would need an army of volunteers, but I suppose working with some of our community partners might be the most direct way to help the research get done, especially when we're past COVID, when there's sort of for example, climate navigators or community workshops being held. I can envision ways that there would be opportunities for involvement that way, but mostly at this point, it would be spreading the word. It would be telling other colleagues or folks in that work in research. Opportunities for creative funding certainly are always welcome. So I think those are the main things. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Dave. And this concludes tonight's event. So thank you so much for being part of our series. We hope you have a great evening and hope you have a wonderful holidays and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much.
Have a good holiday season.